So you might say, well, hang on a second. In my grandparents' day or my parents' day, when they passed away, a simple will was fine and everything went smoothly. So why are you telling me that it is not enough? Well, the reason for that is that times have changed. And there have been three key drivers in the last 30 to 40 years that have meant that a will is not enough. So let's have a look at those drivers. The first one is that we have more wealth than our parents and grandparents did. For most of us, we now have superannuation, which adds to our wealth significantly. If you look at, say, your parents or grandparents in the 1970s, traditionally and primarily what they owned was a house, which might have been worth $30,000, and they had a bit of cash at bank. They didn't have super because super was only introduced compulsorily in the early 1990s, and that's all they had. It took them 30 years to pay off the mortgage. That same couple, 40 years down the track, that house is worth $600,000, and we might have $400,000 of super between a couple, if not more. A lot of people's super balances are almost worth what their house is. So a couple nowadays in their 70s could easily have $1 million of wealth. Now, go back to the 70s, you had a $30,000 house and a little bit of cash. When you passed away, you might have had 4 children, and each of them probably net in the hand got $5,000 or $6,000, which is enough for a car or an overseas trip. Not a lot of money. Parents now passing away might have only 2 children, and they've got $1 million worth of wealth. That means that each child stands to inherit $500,000. That is serious money. And so it's really important that we make sure that they get it in the most protected and tax-effective way, and that they in fact get it. And that applies, of course, to any loved one that you want to give it to, whether it's children or nieces and nephews or your spouse or whoever. With this extra wealth and assets comes additional complexity in how we hold our money. And one of our key insights that we're going to talk about is all the different pots of money that we hold and how a will doesn't cover all of them. I'm thinking particularly of superannuation, but not just superannuation. So taxes are alive and well, and there is a death tax on superannuation where it's given to non-dependents. Classic is adult children. There is a 17% flat tax on the concessional component of your super. So for every $100,000 of super that you have in that category, there is a $17,000 tax on it. If you have insurance in your super, the tax to those independents are $32,000. Huge taxes, and they need to be avoided if at all possible. And an estate plan can do that. A simple will doesn't go there. So that is a key thing. The other thing, there are one-off tax opportunities that you can incorporate into your estate plan. And I'm particularly thinking of testamentary trusts for your beneficiaries. And if you haven't had a serious discussion on testamentary trusts, I encourage you to see an estate planning lawyer to talk about this one-off tax opportunity for your loved ones, because it is incredibly powerful and effective, and there is nothing that you or I can have outside of that inheritance trust that matches it for tax opportunities. And finally, the third element is that our personal lives are way more complex than they were back, say, in the 70s. You will recall that in the mid-70s, the Family Law Act came in and it introduced no blame divorce. So people started getting divorced and they started repartnering, and de facto relationships became the norm. And so we have the rise of Brady Bunch families. Some people call it blended families. Now, you have a blended family and you have double the size of your family, and second spouses, third spouses, children and stepchildren all have the ability to claim on your estate. So This is something that you need to be mindful of, and you need to have a plan that makes sure the right people are getting the money that you want them to. So this is a very key, and it also means that you have to be quite aware of a very dangerous thing that is happening in estate law, and that is the rise of the L-shaped inheritance. What do I mean by L-shaped inheritance? Okay, it means that your wealth was supposed to, let's say, go to your spouse and then your children and then your grandchildren, and instead it goes L-shaped and off to somebody else, either because they made a claim or you left them the money and they went and changed their will and left it all to their own children or to a new partner or something like that. Now, a good estate plan will look at those things and ensure that your ultimate goal of who you want your wealth to go to will happen.